In the early hours of Friday, the 25th of September 2020, a 23-year-old man was arrested in Pollards Hill for possession of ammunition and Class B drugs following a stop and search, and was taken to the Croydon Custody Centre. The suspect, who was handcuffed behind his back, was taken into the building and was placed into a holding area in the custody suite while officers prepared to search him. As Sergeant Matt Ratana approached him with a metal detector to assist in a search, the man, whilst handcuffed, pulled out a revolver that he had concealed by his side and opened fire, hitting the sergeant in the process before being tackled to the ground. Sergeant Matt Ratana was rushed to St George's Hospital in Tooting, but despite the best efforts from the emergency workers, he was sadly pronounced dead at 4:20 am. Matt Ratana, known as Matt to his family and colleagues, was born on the 3rd of May 1966 in the Hawke's Bay region of New Zealand and was of Maori descent. He moved to England in 1989, joining the Metropolitan Police 2 years later in a career that lasted for nearly 30 years, seeing him promoted to the role of sergeant. During this time, he returned home to serve with the New Zealand Police, joining the British High Commission wing in 2003 and serving in the Auckland City and Counties Manukau police districts before returning to England in 2008. He moved to Croydon in 2015, where at the time of the incident he was an experienced custody sergeant working at Croydon Custody Centre. He was just 2 months away from retirement after his long and illustrious career before he was fatally shot in a police custody facility, making him the first police officer to be fatally shot in the UK since the murders of Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone in 2012. He was described by colleagues as a man who was big in stature and big in heart, and he leaves behind him a partner and a son. He was also a rugby fanatic, with the sport playing a huge part in his life, as he was also the head coach at East Grinstead Rugby Club. In the following days from his passing, tributes poured in from around the globe for the popular sergeant and rugby coach. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of his native New Zealand, said that she was incredibly sad to hear about the murder, and she expressed her sorrow to all of his whānau across the world and offered her condolences. On Sunday, members of East Grinstead Rugby Club paid tribute to Matt, describing him as an irreplaceable figure in the community and a role model to many. PC Sarah De Silva, who works at Croydon Police Station and also plays for the rugby club's women's team, laid a signed Met Police jacket alongside the other tributes and told the PA news agency that coming down to the club for the memorial silence was especially poignant for her. She said that he was an absolutely fantastic character, full of life with the biggest smile you've ever seen, and a fantastic mentor on the rugby field and for the police as well. Any question was never too much for Matt, and it was deeply saddening to know that such a deeply tragic event had resulted in the loss of his life. She expressed that she couldn't put into words how shocked the force was at the tragedy. Grieving police officers due to work an overtime shift with Sergeant Matt Ratana paid tribute to him by buying a McDonald's breakfast and saving a chair for him. Sergeant Richard Lovelock said that although the gesture was daft, it was inspired by a touching moment that had helped the team come to terms with Sergeant Ratana's death on Friday. Sergeant Lovelock posted a picture of the breakfast, which was accompanied by an All Blacks rugby shirt, in honour of Sergeant Ratana's background and enthusiasm for the sport. Sergeant Ratana's colleagues' breakfast tribute came on National Police Memorial Day, which has seen multiple commemorations take place for officers across the UK that have lost their lives whilst on duty. The post had received more than 3,000 likes and had been shared almost 5,000 times on Facebook. Sergeant Lovelock calculated the pay that Sergeant Ratana would have earned while working on the overtime shift and has donated it to a Just Giving page supporting the family, which has already raised more than £61,000. Sergeant Lovelock has also served 29 years with the Metropolitan Police, the same as Sergeant Ratana before his death, and said that they often talked about retirement plans together. The House of Commons also honoured Sergeant Ratana by holding a minute's silence on National Police Memorial Day. His partner, Sue Bushby, shared a tribute in which she spoke of her heartbreak of her tragic loss. She said that there weren't really any words for how she was feeling about losing someone that she loved in such a tragic manner. She expressed that he is greatly missed and will never be forgotten and will always be in her head and in her heart. A murder investigation was launched, with police searching various crime scenes, carrying out inquiries on the suspect and examining video footage. The Independent Office for Police Conduct are also probing into the course of events that led to the suspect being able to retain and discharge the gun following his arrest. Forensic officers were seen entering the police station in white suits on Friday morning, recovering a non-police revolver from the scene, which had been missed in the initial pat-down of the subject, while floral tributes were left throughout the day. Investigators were reviewing CCTV of the incident, which captured the suspect with his hands behind his back before unleashing the revolver. Along with the police custody holding room, the police were painstakingly searching for different crime scenes in connection with the incident, with forensics also being carried out in an area of London Road in Pollards Hill, where the gunman was initially arrested by officers. Forensic searches continued, with a police van parked outside of the suspect's £700,000 family home in Southbrook Road in Norbury. The investigation also led to specialist officers standing guard outside a former Second World War ammunitions dump on a farmland in Banstead in Surrey, a location that includes access to several derelict buildings and more than 30 acres of land, with the complex search expected to take days to complete. This search comes after neighbours there reported an explosion in the early hours of the previous morning, with armed police blowing the doors of a barn to investigate further. In the early hours of Sunday, a second man was arrested in Norwich on suspicion of supplying a firearm and was taken into custody at a South London police station before later being released on bail. Detectives are yet to speak to the 23-year-old who shot Sergeant Matt Ratana, as he remains in critical condition in hospital. No police firearms were discharged during the incident, and it's alleged that the suspect's injuries were caused by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. As of now, the case is not being treated as terror-related. The suspect was identified as Louis de Zoyser, 23 years old, who was born in Croydon but was raised in Norbury, South London, along with his parents and 4 siblings. A former engineering student at UCL, at the time of the incident he worked as a data analyst for HMRC and had received bonuses due to his good work. His Sri Lankan father, Channa, admitted being a heavy cocaine user, while his mother, Elizabeth, is an interpreter and a former Green Party local election candidate. He had been subjected to repeated beatings by his abusive father, who used to beat him over trivial matters, and in 2019, Louis was arrested for fighting with his father. His father, Channa de Zoyser, had been convicted of ABH after he admitted hitting his son 4 times with a block of wood. Diagnosed with autism aged 13, he was a highly intelligent child that excelled academically at the Catholic John Fisher School in Purley, South London, where he got straight A grades at A-level, before studying mechanical engineering at the University College of London. At school, he was often bullied by fellow pupils, and had been whipped with chains because he was small in stature and, along with having autism, made him an easy target. Yearbook quotes from his classmates described him as very clever, a maths geek for the form quiz, and good with weapons. One former schoolmate described Louis as reclusive, and that he was obsessed with weapons, and that he used to brag about being on the dark web. The former pupil said that he claimed to watch Islamic State films and bragged about seeing hitmen and guns for sale. He continued by saying that he also had a weird obsession for weapons and guns and would design them on the school computers. At the time of the incident, Louis was spending £200 a month on cannabis, as according to him it mellowed him down, but he also had previously been arrested twice for fighting. He moved out of his family home a year before the incident after his parents reconciled and his father moved back in. It is understood that Louis was not regarded as a subject of interest by the security services, but he was known to the authorities. You see, Louis has a long criminal history, and 2 years prior had been referred to the Home Office's Prevents De-Radicalisation programme, an anti-extremism programme developed by the government, in an attempt to prevent individuals from joining extremist groups and carrying out terrorist activities, where after completion he was not deemed as posing as a threat. A post-mortem examination concluded that Sergeant Matt Ratana died from a gunshot wound to the chest. 1 week on from Matt's death, Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick stood with colleagues outside the Metropolitan Police's Empress State Building in West London, saying that this senseless murder had strengthened her officer's determination to fight against violent crime. She explained how the huge and heartfelt outpouring of tributes reflected how well loved and highly respected Matt was, whilst describing him as both a great police officer, but more importantly, a lovely man, with a ready smile and a big heart. She continued to say that she had been touched by the support from the public, and had explained about their determination to carry on through this tough time, as the police are committed to serving and protecting the community, and that's what Matt would have wanted. As a tribute to their friend and colleague, 30,000 members of staff from the Metropolitan Police paused at 11 AM as a sign of respect for one of their own, who was an inspiration to those who knew him. On the 13th of November 2020, Louis was formally arrested on suspicion of murdering Sergeant Matt Ratana, as Scotland Yard deemed him well enough to be arrested, despite him still requiring hospital treatment. In the summer of the following year, Louis was charged with the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana, along with charges for possession of a firearm and possession of ammunition. The following day, he appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from his hospital bed, with his lawyer sat by his bedside for the brief hearing. Louis did not speak, instead communicating by holding up a whiteboard with his name and date of birth written on it, to confirm his identity. A memorial was unveiled at East Grinstead Rugby Club by his family on Saturday the 3rd of July, to pay tribute to the police officer shot in the line of duty, who coached the rugby club. Louis had to attend a number of pre-trial hearings over the course of the next year, in which he would attend over video link from a secure hospital, either from his hospital bed or sitting in a wheelchair with his right arm in a sling. Using a whiteboard, he would write down his full name and date of birth to confirm his identity, but he was not asked to enter any pleas to the charges of murder, possession of a firearm, and possession of ammunition. He was accused of discharging 4 bullets in a holding cell at Croydon Custody Centre after he was arrested, 2 of which hit Sergeant Matt Ratana, 1 in his leg, and a fatal hit to his chest. On the 28th of April 2023, Louis de Zoysa appeared via video link from his hospital bed for his hearing at Northampton Crown Court, sitting in a wheelchair, with his right arm in a sling. Again using a whiteboard, he wrote the words "not guilty" across it, pleading not guilty to the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana, claiming diminished responsibility due to an autistic meltdown caused by the stress of the arrest and confined space. He claimed that he did not mean to fire the gun, as he was having a panic attack at the time of the incident. Louis was further held in custody, awaiting for his 3-week trial to begin, set for June the 6th. On Tuesday the 6th of June 2023, Louis DeZoiser appeared at his trial before Northampton Crown Court in a wheelchair, charged for the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana. Louis, who sat in the dock in a wheelchair alongside an intermediary, denied the murder. He claimed that at the time of the incident, he was suffering from an autistic meltdown, and that he did not mean to kill Sergeant Ratana or to even cause him any serious harm. The court heard how Louis was arrested in Pollards Hill at 1:30 AM following a stop and search, due to a report of burglaries in the area, and was found to be in possession of ammunition and Class B drugs, and was taken to Croydon Custody Centre. He confessed to the officers that he was carrying cannabis during the stop and search, while he was walking towards his parents' home, but he didn't disclose that he was carrying the revolver that he had purchased from an auction online. He also lied about the bullets by claiming that they weren't real, but he had in fact made them himself on the farm where he lived. Footage from inside the police van shows how close he came to being discovered with the revolver, which he covertly removed from a holster concealed on his left side, just yards away from officers. A rear-facing camera mounted on the van filmed a reversed image of Louis' empty left hand as he exited the vehicle, with the gun in his non-dominant right hand already hidden under the rear vent of his overcoat. Analysis of Louis' devices revealed an interest in weaponry and violence, including right-wing extremism, Islamic extremism, and homophobia. An infantry rifle was among items found after a search of his flat and workshop in Banstead, along with a pipe gun, a dummy launcher, and various types of ammunition, as well as crafting his own bullets for the antique revolver that he used to kill Sergeant Ratana. Louis had also assembled a shotgun from old parts. He explained to his consultant forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Nigel Blackwood, that he had worked on weapons in his workshop for about 6 months before the shooting. He was concerned about food shortages during the early stages of the COVID pandemic, because the shops were running out of food, and he was carrying the gun in case he had to kill wildlife in order to survive, like in the movie Mad Max, where the farmers would carry guns. He also claimed that he began carrying a gun for protection because he had been beaten up by drug dealers. Whilst handcuffed behind his back, Louis was taken into a holding area in the custody suite, as officers prepared to search him for a second time. Sergeant Ratana, whilst accompanied by the 2 arresting officers, introduced himself to Louis and explained to him the possible charges that he was facing. When Sergeant Ratana told Louis to stand up so that they could begin their search, the horrifying CCTV footage shows Louis standing up whilst contorting his body, before suddenly producing a loaded revolver that was concealed by his side, and opened fire on the sergeant. The prosecution stated that Louis aimed his gun directly at the chest of Sergeant Ratana and pulled the trigger twice on purpose, with the intention to kill. The first shot hit Sergeant Ratana in the chest and was the fatal blow, the second shot of which hit the sergeant in his thigh after being pulled towards the ground by an assisting officer. As the assisting officer was wrestling Louis to the ground, 2 more additional shots were fired from the revolver during the ordeal. At the time, the gun was in Louis' hand, and as he was lifting the revolver up towards the side of his head, the actions of the officer struggling with him meant that the gun raised upwards, pointing towards the left wall of the cell, and as Louis fired a third shot, it missed both parties involved. The officer then wrestled Louis down to the ground, at which time the additional officer took hold of a taser and tried to fire it twice. In the 16 seconds after the third shot hit the wall, Louis was on the floor on his left side with the revolver underneath him, and a muffled bang was heard. The prosecution stated that any electrical charge from the taser could not have caused Louis to have fired the 4th shot, because the gunshot was heard before the taser was deployed. During the trial, forensic scientist and ballistic expert Anthony Miller demonstrated to a jury how the antique revolver worked. He explained that the gun was loaded with dummy bullets and completely safe to be used in the courtroom, and gave jurors the chance to hold the weapon and to fire from it, although it was aimed at the ceiling while being fired as an extra precaution. After he had examined the revolver and the ammunition that was recovered after the incident, he was asked whether the revolver ever went off by accident during his rigorous testing. He explained that he had dropped it to the ground, struck it with a cloth-faced hammer, and generally treated it roughly, to which the revolver still did not go off. 1 week into the trial at Northampton Crown Court, Louis, while sat in a wheelchair, communicated with a whiteboard and a marker due to his communication difficulties as a result of the brain damage caused by the gunshot, gave evidence in his defence. Simplified questions had been prepared to enable Louis to give his evidence, for which he often delivered in a single-word answer during the session. He claimed that he was stuttering with fear and hyperventilating as he was taken through a tunnel into the custody suite, and asked the police officers if they were going to zap him when he was taken to the police station. He confirmed that the CCTV shows the shooting, and when asked about how he felt about what happened to Sergeant Ratana, he replied, "Sad." When asked what he understood murder to mean, he replied, "Kill." His barrister, Imran Khan, KC, then asked, "Are you guilty of murder, Louis?" To which he replied, "No." Later in evidence, however, he said that he did not understand what the word guilty meant. When asked about his family background, Louis drew a picture of a knife, with Mr. Khan confirming that he was presenting that his dad was cutting somebody with a knife. Whilst being further asked about family dinners, Louis said violence and crazy, with Mr. Khan saying that his understanding is that there was violence at the dinner table and that it was crazy. Louis, who has autism, also told the court that he had previously smoked cannabis, as it made him feel mellow, which is why he was found to be in possession. On the morning of the murder, Louis, who was armed with the loaded revolver, appeared to be on his way to his family home. Louis' intentions that night are unknown, as only he knows why he was carrying a firearm on that night, knowing whether he intended to use it or not. Following his trial at Northampton Crown Court, on the 23rd of June 2023, the jury believes Louis de Zoysa had pulled the trigger on purpose 4 times, whilst he was handcuffed in a holding room at a custody centre, and was found guilty of the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana. Prosecutor Duncan Penny, KC, said in his closing speech that Louis had hidden the gun and was carrying it on the streets in a holster on the night of the shooting. He'd earlier told police he was carrying cannabis during a stop and search while he was walking to his parents' home, but didn't disclose that he was carrying a revolver. In the cell, Louis knew he was about to be searched, at which point he produced the revolver behind his back. He twisted his body in order to get it into his right hand, in a place where he could aim the gun at Sergeant Ratana. Once the gun was pointing at the sergeant, Louis pulled the trigger. He explained that all of these were conscious, deliberate actions with the intention to kill, and that he knew what he was doing. He stated that he did not have an autistic meltdown, and that his actions were voluntary and controlled, and that he acted in cold blood. Following the conviction on Friday, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley paid tribute to Sergeant Ratana as an outstanding police officer who made an enduring impact wherever he went. Speaking at a press conference outside Northampton Crown Court, he said, "Matt dedicated 30 years of his life to policing, and he was nearing retirement when he was tragically murdered. He was an outstanding officer who brought joy to his work. He treated everyone with respect, with compassion, and with good humour. Whether it was on the streets or in the custody centre, as a uniformed police officer, on the rugby field, or later as a coach, it's clear that he was someone who made an enduring impact wherever he went. We will ensure that he's never forgotten." Speaking outside the courthouse, Sergeant Ratana's partner, Sue Bushby, described him as a gentle giant, and said that he will never be forgotten. She said, "Today is about justice for Matt. His life was taken too soon in the line of duty, doing a job that he loved. a cruel end to a lifetime of service and dedication protecting others. Whilst the court case is concluded, the constant feeling of grief and loss continues. My love for Matt, my gentle giant, will never end. He will never be forgotten. On Thursday the 27th of July 2023, Louis de Zoysa was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that he will spend the rest of his life in prison for the murder of Sergeant Matt Ratana. And that brings to a close the horrific case of Sergeant Matt Ratana, who was tragically taken away from his loving family and friends at 54 years old. Lawless Underground would wish to extend its sincere condolences to the loved ones of Sergeant Matt Ratana. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please consider liking the video and subscribing to Lawless Underground for more crime-related content. If you have any suggestions or requests for future videos, then please let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, and goodbye for now from Lawless Underground.